The grand Ashford Manor stood proudly among the rolling green hills of Victorian England, yet beneath its elegant stone walls lingered a silence that no amount of wealth or refinement could disguise. Once celebrated for lavish gatherings and prosperous harvests, the estate now carried the burden of enormous debts. Every polished silver candlestick and every carefully tended rose garden hid a painful truth. Lord Ashford's fortune had vanished through failed investments, poor harvests, and years of trying to preserve the family's dignity. The servants whispered quietly, creditors visited almost daily, and the future of the Ashford name rested upon a single heartbreaking decision. Emily Ashford, 25 years old, possessed the kind of beauty poets struggled to describe. Her chestnut hair shimmered beneath the morning sunlight, while her gentle gray eyes reflected both intelligence and compassion. She spent her days teaching village children to read, tending flowers in the manor gardens, and comforting those less fortunate than herself. Though admired throughout the county for her grace, she never sought admiration. Emily dreamed only of a peaceful life built upon mutual affection, kindness, and honest love. One rainy afternoon, her father requested that she join him in his study. His shoulders, once broad and confident, now appeared bent beneath invisible weights. Beside him sat her mother, silently twisting a handkerchief. Emily immediately sensed that something dreadful had happened. Lord Ashford spoke with a trembling voice. "Our family has reached the end of its strength. Unless we secure immediate assistance, this estate will be taken from us within months." Emily listened quietly, refusing to interrupt. "There is one proposal," her father continued. "His Grace, the Duke of Blackmore, has offered to settle every debt and preserve our home." She managed a hopeful smile. "That is generous of His Grace." Her father's eyes filled with sorrow. "There is one condition." Emily felt her heart tighten. "You must marry his youngest son." Silence settled over the room. She had heard stories of the Duke's youngest son many times before. Roger Blackmore, only 24 years old, lived almost entirely away from society despite belonging to one of England's most respected noble families. People rarely spoke kindly of him. Ladies whispered that his face had been permanently scarred in a childhood riding accident. Gentlemen mocked his unusual features behind closed doors. Invitations often arrived for every member of the Duke's family except Roger himself. Emily lowered her eyes. "So, this marriage has already been arranged." Her father nodded, unable to meet her gaze. "If you refuse, I shall understand completely. We will face whatever comes together." Emily looked around the study where every portrait, bookshelf, and familiar chair held memories of her childhood. She imagined the loyal servants losing their livelihoods and her aging parents watching generations of family history disappear forever. After several long moments, she smiled sadly. "If my sacrifice protects our family, then I accept." Her mother burst into tears while Lord Ashford embraced his daughter with profound gratitude and unbearable guilt. Across the countryside at Blackmore Castle, Roger Blackmore remained unaware that his future had just been decided. Unlike his elder brothers, Roger cared little for grand banquets or fashionable society. His greatest joy came from wandering the estate, speaking with farmers, helping stable hands repair fences, and reading thick volumes in the magnificent castle library. Though his face carried deep scars across one cheek, and his features lacked the elegance admired by fashionable London society, his character reflected patience, humility, and quiet generosity. That afternoon, he personally delivered medicine to an elderly groundskeeper whose wife had fallen ill. Before leaving, Roger discreetly placed several gold coins upon the family's table, pretending not to notice when the grateful couple tried to return them. As he rode back toward the castle, several passing gentlemen recognized him. One laughed softly. "There goes the unfortunate Blackmore son." Another replied with a smirk. "They say even fortune could not make that face handsome." Roger heard every word. He neither argued nor frowned. Instead, he continued riding peacefully, long accustomed to cruelty disguised as humor. Later that evening, the Duke summoned Roger into his private office. "My son," the Duke began carefully, "I have arranged a marriage." Roger looked surprised but remained respectful. "May I ask with whom, father?" "Miss Emily Ashford." Roger immediately recognized the name. "The lady known for teaching village children. The very same." Roger remained silent. The Duke sighed deeply. "I know what society says about you. I also know what kind of man you truly are. Emily possesses kindness greater than beauty, and I believe she deserves a husband who will cherish her." Roger lowered his head thoughtfully. "If she has accepted unwillingly because her family faces hardship, I cannot blame her." "You are not angry?" "No." The Duke watched his youngest son with quiet admiration. Roger spoke gently. "I only hope she never feels imprisoned by this arrangement." Preparations for the wedding spread quickly across neighboring counties. Drawing rooms buzzed with endless gossip. Many pitied the beautiful Emily. Others claimed she had traded happiness for security. Young noblewomen whispered that no lady deserved such misfortune, while arrogant gentlemen joked that the Duke had finally found someone desperate enough to marry Roger. Neither Emily nor Roger responded to the rumors. They met only once before the ceremony, under the Duke's supervision, in a peaceful drawing room overlooking the gardens. Emily offered a respectful curtsy. Roger bowed politely. Neither spoke for several moments. Finally, Roger smiled with quiet sincerity. "I know this was not the future you imagined." Emily looked surprised by his honesty. He continued softly, "I shall never demand your affection. If in time we become friends, I shall consider myself fortunate." For the first time since accepting the arrangement, Emily felt a small piece of the heavy fear inside her heart begin to lift. The wedding passed with all the elegance expected of two noble families, yet very little warmth filled the magnificent chapel. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, musicians performed graceful hymns, and distinguished guests praised the beauty of the ceremony. Beneath their polished smiles, however, many whispered cruel remarks. Some pitied Emily for losing the chance to marry a handsome gentleman. Others quietly wondered whether Roger would ever inspire genuine affection in any wife. Emily heard enough of those murmurs to understand exactly how society viewed her new husband, but Roger behaved as though every unkind word drifted away with the wind. When they arrived at Blackmore Castle as husband and wife, Emily expected formal instructions, strict expectations, and endless obligations. Instead, Roger surprised her before they had even crossed the entrance hall. "You have left everything familiar behind," he said gently. "Please think of this house as your home, not your prison. If there is anything that would make you comfortable, you need only ask." Emily thanked him politely, still uncertain whether such kindness could remain unchanged after the first few days of marriage. To her surprise, it did. Roger never demanded her company, never questioned her silence, and never insisted she perform duties beyond what she willingly accepted. Every morning he greeted her with genuine courtesy before leaving to oversee the estate. Every evening he wished her peaceful rest, regardless of whether they had spent any time together. His respectful distance slowly replaced Emily's fear with cautious curiosity. One afternoon she mentioned, almost absent-mindedly, that she missed tending the flowers at Ashford Manor. Several days later, Roger invited her to walk beyond the eastern wing of the castle. Hidden behind ancient stone walls stood a newly restored greenhouse filled with roses, lilies, lavender, jasmine, and climbing ivy. Glass windows welcomed the afternoon sunlight, while rare orchids bloomed beside delicate ferns. Gardening tools had been carefully arranged, and fresh soil waited in polished wooden planters. Emily stared in astonishment. "You built this?" Roger smiled modestly. "I merely asked the gardeners to help." "Your father once mentioned that flowers always made you happiest." She walked slowly through the greenhouse, gently touching the petals of a white rose. No one has ever remembered something so small. Roger answered quietly. I did not think it was small. That simple exchange lingered in Emily's thoughts long after the afternoon ended. As the weeks passed, she noticed other quiet acts that no guest at the wedding could ever have imagined. Roger often left the castle before sunrise without announcing where he was going. Curious, Emily eventually asked one of the elderly servants. The housekeeper smiled warmly. Master Roger visits the village school every Thursday. Emily decided to accompany him one morning without warning. When she arrived, she found Roger sitting among village children, patiently teaching arithmetic and reading stories aloud. The children laughed freely around him, completely unconcerned by the scars others mocked. Before leaving, Roger quietly handed the schoolmaster an envelope containing money for books and winter clothing, requesting that no one be told who had provided the donation. Emily watched from the doorway, deeply moved. On another occasion, she discovered him helping a widow repair the roof of her cottage after heavy rain. Another day, he arranged employment for an injured soldier unable to continue military service. During a particularly cold evening, he personally delivered blankets and food baskets to struggling families, refusing to let servants take credit or even accompany him. Everywhere they traveled together, the estate workers greeted Roger with sincere affection. The stable master declared, "His lordship never asks another man to perform work he would not gladly do himself." An elderly gardener added, "When my grandson fell ill, Master Roger remained at the bedside until the physician arrived." Emily realized she had never heard genuine praise spoken with such heartfelt gratitude. One evening they shared tea in the castle library. Shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with histories, poetry, science, and philosophy. Roger noticed Emily admiring a beautifully illustrated astronomy volume. "Would you like to see the observatory?" he asked. She nodded eagerly. High above the castle roof, Roger introduced her to a large brass telescope inherited from his grandfather. Together they watched stars appear across the clear Victorian sky. Roger explained constellations with quiet enthusiasm, never pretending to know more than he did. Emily listened carefully, fascinated not only by the heavens but by the peaceful joy shining within his eyes whenever he shared knowledge. For the first time since their marriage, conversation came naturally. They discussed literature, childhood memories, music, and the changing seasons. Roger laughed at one of Emily's stories about chasing escaped geese across her family's orchard, and she found herself laughing with him until tears filled her eyes. The sound surprised them both. Weeks later, the Duke hosted a magnificent winter ball attended by influential nobles from across England. Glittering gowns swept across polished floors while orchestras filled the ballroom with lively music. As Emily accepted refreshments, she overheard two gentlemen speaking nearby. "It remains astonishing," one sneered, "that such a lovely woman must spend her life beside the Duke's unfortunate-looking son." The other chuckled. "Perhaps she simply avoids looking at him." Roger had entered the room just in time to hear every word. Without anger or embarrassment, he quietly turned toward the terrace, intending to spare everyone discomfort. Emily watched him leave. Something inside her changed forever. She crossed the crowded ballroom without hesitation, ignoring every curious glance. Reaching Roger before he stepped outside, she gently slipped her arm through his. Then, with calm confidence, she turned toward the assembled guests. "My husband possesses more honor, kindness, and dignity than any gentleman in this room," she said clearly. "Those who judge only a face reveal far more about themselves than about him." Silence settled across the ballroom. Roger looked at Emily with quiet disbelief. For the first time in many years, someone had defended him not from obligation, but from conviction. As music resumed and conversation slowly returned, Emily realized an unexpected truth. She could no longer remember the face society insisted was ugly. Whenever she looked at Roger now, She saw only the goodness that shone through every smile, every thoughtful word, and every compassionate deed. Somewhere between friendship and admiration, without noticing exactly when, her heart had quietly begun to choose the man everyone else had failed to see. The weeks following the winter ball brought a quiet peace to Blackmore Castle. Although gossip still traveled through drawing rooms and fashionable gatherings, something had changed. Those who had witnessed Emily's heartfelt defense of her husband found themselves questioning the stories they had accepted for years. Roger, however, remained exactly as he had always been. Praise did not make him proud, just as ridicule had never made him bitter. Each morning he continued visiting tenants, settling disputes with fairness, and ensuring every family on the estate received honest treatment. Emily admired him more with every passing day. She no longer walked beside Roger out of duty, but because his presence filled her with comfort. Their conversations grew longer, their laughter more frequent, and the distance that had once separated them quietly disappeared. They read together in the evenings, strolled through the greenhouse she loved, and shared plans for improving the villages surrounding the estate. For the first time since leaving Ashford Manor, Emily felt completely at home. One crisp spring morning, an urgent letter arrived from her father. Lord Ashford had fallen seriously ill after months of exhausting legal disputes. Several dishonest businessmen had attempted to seize what remained of the Ashford estate by presenting forged financial documents, hoping to profit from the family's weakened position. The strain of defending his family's honor had left him confined to bed. Emily's hands trembled as she finished reading. Roger gently placed a reassuring hand over hers. "We shall leave immediately." Within the hour they were traveling toward Ashford Manor. When they arrived, Emily found her father pale and weary but grateful to see them. Her mother tried to remain hopeful, yet fear lingered in every corner of the once cheerful home. Roger wasted no time. Rather than relying solely upon lawyers, he carefully examined every account book, contract, and letter connected with the family's finances. His patience and remarkable attention to detail soon revealed numerous inconsistencies. The signatures on several important documents had clearly been imitated, while payment records had been deliberately altered to create false debts. Roger quietly gathered trustworthy solicitors and presented the evidence before local magistrates. Because he remained calm, respectful, and prepared with undeniable proof, the fraudulent claims quickly collapsed under careful examination. The dishonest businessmen were publicly exposed, and every attempt to seize the Ashford estate failed. At the same time, Roger arranged for one of London's finest physicians to examine Lord Ashford. He insisted upon covering every expense without allowing Emily's parents to feel embarrassed by his generosity. Weeks later, Lord Ashford's health steadily improved. One evening, while Emily helped her father walk through the garden, he smiled warmly. "My dear, I once believed I was sacrificing your happiness." Emily looked toward Roger, who was laughing with several village children nearby after repairing a broken swing. "You gave me the greatest blessing of my life," she answered softly. When they returned to Blackmore Castle, Emily found herself reflecting upon everything Roger had done. He had expected no praise, demanded no gratitude, and never once reminded anyone that he had rescued her family's future. Every act had been performed simply because someone he loved needed help. One peaceful evening, Roger invited Emily to walk through the greenhouse where their friendship had first begun to blossom. Hundreds of flowers surrounded them, filling the warm air with delicate fragrance. Sunlight filtered through the glass roof, casting gentle patterns across the stone paths. Roger stopped beside the white rose she had admired months before. "I am grateful," he said quietly, "that this place has brought you some happiness." Emily smiled. "It has." After a thoughtful silence, Roger continued. "When our marriage began, I hoped only that you would never regret showing me kindness. Whatever the future brings, I shall always be thankful for your friendship." Emily felt tears gather in her eyes. She stepped closer. "Roger, may I tell you something honestly?" "Always." She took both of his hands. "On our wedding day, I believed my future had been taken from me. I thought I was marrying a stranger because duty demanded it." Roger listened silently. "But every day since then, you have shown me compassion without expecting anything in return. You remembered my smallest joys. You cared for my family as though they were your own. You have given hope to children, comfort to workers, and dignity to people others ignored." Her voice trembled with emotion. "I searched for happiness all my life without realizing it was quietly waiting in your heart." Roger lowered his eyes, overcome by feelings he could scarcely express. Emily gently lifted his chin. "When I look at you now, I do not see the scars everyone else notices." She smiled through joyful tears. "I see the finest gentleman in England." Roger whispered, almost afraid to believe her words. "Emily, I love you." For a long moment neither spoke. Then Roger embraced her with tender care, as though holding the greatest treasure he had ever known. "I have loved you from the first moment we met," he admitted softly. "I simply never believed such happiness could belong to me." Months later, the Duke hosted another grand gathering at Blackmore Castle. This time the atmosphere felt entirely different. Guests who had once mocked Roger now greeted him with sincere respect. Stories of his generosity, wisdom, and integrity had spread throughout the county. Estate owners sought his advice, charitable organizations welcomed his support, and even those who had judged him harshly admitted they had been profoundly mistaken. Late that evening, the Duke stood beside his youngest son, watching Roger and Emily dance together. With quiet pride he said, "People spent years searching for the handsomest gentleman in England. They never understood that true beauty cannot be measured by a mirror." Roger smiled modestly. The Duke placed a fatherly hand upon his shoulder. "My son, today I no longer pity your lonely past." He glanced toward Emily. "I simply thank Providence for bringing someone wise enough to recognize your worth." Years passed happily. Roger and Emily transformed Blackmore Castle into a place known for generosity rather than privilege. They established schools for village children, expanded medical care for struggling families, restored neglected cottages, and ensured every servant received fairness and respect. Their home echoed with laughter, friendship, and eventually the joyful voices of children who learned from their parents that character always outweighed appearance. Whenever visitors admired the warmth of their family, Emily would quietly remember the frightened woman who believed she had been forced into an unhappy marriage. Life had taught her a truth far greater than beauty or noble titles. A handsome face may capture attention for a season, but a loving heart, guided by kindness, humility, and unwavering compassion, remains beautiful for a lifetime. And that was the greatest treasure she and Roger would ever share together.